All right, it's not clickbait, and I've recorded this a few times, and I've gone into a rambling mess. So I'm gonna try to be more concise. So let's do. We're gonna two reasons for this video. A, I want to give a health update to people who have been worried about what's been going on with the channel and going on with me. And secondly, I want to kind of be an advocate. Again, I've talked about like people around me that I know and stuff, and people who have worked for me and stuff. I always tell them you have to be your own advocate when it comes to healthcare. And this is a perfect example of it because there's two issues really involved here. So what happened was, quick rundown of before, I got a respiratory infection back in late September, early October. Saw the doc, they gave me some steroids. I'm like, I'm really afraid it's going to turn into something bacterial because that's kind of what always happens to me. And when I get one of these kind of colds or viruses, it was some random virus. It wasn't COVID. I never got COVID. But it was some like basic virus that then like turned into a bronchial infection. And, I'm like, they're like, no, we'll give you some steroids to help with the cough. You'll be fine. So I was feeling better because of the steroids they gave me. Decided to do my trip. I was going down to Vegas for 3 weeks, rented a house down there, spent time with my son who lives down there and cover the SEMA show. So I drive down there, 14-hour drive in the car, get down there, and I'm starting to not feel good again. And it starts getting worse and worse and worse over the 3 weeks down there. And did one of those doctor on demand kind of thing with the phone. And the doc's like, look, it sounds like it's either really bad bronchitis or you maybe have gone into pneumonia at this point. I'm going to put you on this like mega dose of antibiotics and see how you feel. So they gave me this course of antibiotics. I was still feeling rough, but I started immediately, pretty much within a day, to start noticing the difference. Was able to go to SEMA, do some other stuff. Made an appointment for when I got back just to follow up with my doctor to see how things were going. So by the time I got back, I was actually feeling fairly good. Of course, my doctor wasn't available, so I get to see the nurse practitioner, which is, how healthcare is these days. The doctors, you only get to see them for 30 seconds as they walk by the door. So see the nurse practitioner, tell her like, look, I've got a little bit residual cough. I'm feeling better from that. But I do have this pain in my leg that's been going on. My thighs really tightening up. I just did this road trip down to Vegas, spent a lot of time sitting around, not doing much, and then a road trip back. I was kind of concerned about blood clots, stuff like that. She looks at my leg. She goes, you're fine. I'm concerned about the pneumonia. I want you to go and get a chest x-ray. I'm like, well, all right. Now, the other thing is, real quick, is that now a lot of people aren't going to believe this, and most doctors didn't either. Even though I'm overweight, I've never really had issues with blood sugar, blood pressure, any of that stuff. All my lab work came back like somebody who's 10, 15 years younger and in good shape. Doctors were always annoyed by it. Granted, I was a 3-sport athlete. I did construction. I did, run wires. I was very active up until like my mid-30s when I started doing more desk job kind of stuff. But anyway, in the last year, it had gotten kind of borderline. And then with this illness and all the stuff I was fighting, the stress from that really kicked it up a notch. So they put me on some stuff to help with my blood sugar, some stuff to help with my blood pressure. And then I went and did the x-ray. And they called me up and said, hey, we want to schedule a phone call so you can talk to the nurse practitioner about your x-ray. And that freaked me out, really freaked out my wife. But I'm like, it can't be that bad because they're not going to call me. They'd call me in if it was something terrible. If it's just maybe something kind of middling, I got to do this or something. We get the phone call Friday night, 4:00. And she says, well, the good news is you don't have pneumonia. Your lungs are clear. Great. Good to hear. She goes, bad news is that we noticed in the x-ray that your heart is enlarged and I've diagnosed you with chronic heart failure. That's not a phone call anybody ever wants to get. Trust me. Having lived through this, it was terrifying. And she's like, well, can I answer any questions? She gives me a little rundown about it. I'm like, I'm familiar with what it is. And she gives me, she goes, do you have any questions? And I said, well, how sure of this are you? Is this like, these are indicators that may be this? She's like, no, we are confident in this diagnosis. Okay. Well, how long do I have? What's going on? Blah, blah, blah. What stage is it in? All this. Can't really answer that until you go see a specialist. We're going to have the specialist. We're going to refer you to a specialist. They'll reach out to you. They'll set up an appointment, blah, 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 blah. Okay. So I'm like, she goes, do you have any other questions? You just told me you can't answer any questions. So anyway, get off the phone, and it was a terrible conversation with my wife. It was a horrible evening, but here's the deal. These people have been wrong before. They told me before that they thought I had colon cancer. Turned out it was the low dose aspirin I was taking that was creating these indications. And when I saw the specialist, he was miffed because he's like, they should have known that. Why didn't they include that? A friend of the family got diagnosed with COPD. This is a person who walks 10 to 15 miles every day at altitude at like 5,000, 5,500 feet. So no, they were totally wrong about that. And there's been a wide, anyway, point is that, and again, it's the nurse practitioner who seemed to feel very full of herself, and you can take whatever way. Point is, I wasn't confident in it. My wife wasn't confident in it. And when we saw the x-ray results, they actually said this is indicative and that it should be checked out, but they didn't say that that was the case. It was her making this diagnosis. But needless to say, it freaked us out. When we finally did get the phone call from the specialist, they said, we'll be able to see you in May. And I'm like, that's a long time from now. And they're like, well, if it was important, then they would have written on it that it needed to be urgent. So we contacted the doctor's office. They're like, oh, our mistake. Anyway, turns around, we get an appointment in about a month. Going to see the doctor, they run a ton of tests. And then they're not happy with those results. So they run these other tests. And then they ask me, hey, can we do these other tests? Because we're trying to be more conclusive on this. I'm like, okay, do whatever you got to do to make sure you know what's going on. They do the tests. They're like, okay, well, now we want you to go wait in the doctor's office. He's going to have a talk with you. Okay, this is the moment. I'm sitting there holding hands. We've been praying like you have no idea. Now, I wasn't really, honestly, afraid for myself. No one wants to hear they're going to die. I'm worried about leaving my family in the lurch, what's going to do to other people, stuff like that, what's going to do to my wife, making her a widow, all that kind of thing. And but God has his plan. And I'm a person of faith. I don't preach a lot about it on the channel, but I am a firm believer. And I haven't always been so. And it wasn't until I finally realized I was screwing up my own life by trying to be too much in control and that I needed to listen to what I was being told. And once I did that, things got a lot easier. You'd be surprised. Anyway, point is that we're sitting there praying. The doctor comes in. He sits down. He starts to do a little bit of small talk. He goes, well, let me get to the gist of it. But I have one question first. What symptoms are you having? And being somebody who's done sales, run businesses, worked with vendors and negotiated contracts and stuff like that, I know how questions like this come about. And when somebody asks you that question, that means they don't know what's going on. They have no idea. And I'm like, there's nothing there. He doesn't have anything. And so I tell him, honestly, nothing. I have no symptoms. The only reason I'm here is because of this x-ray and the nurse practitioner saying that she's confident that I've got chronic heart fatigue or whatever it is, failure. And he's like, no. He's like, we did all the tests. He's like, the point is, he's like, I'm fully confident. There is nothing wrong with your heart. You are perfectly fine. That was a moment. Turns out they did all these tests. They looked at everything. He's like the top level specialist in the area. And so I'm fairly confident in what he did and stuff. He's like, I don't know why they sent you in. This should not have been, you should have gone through all these other stages first. He said, the only thing I'm concerned about is the blood sugar and blood pressure, but you're taking care of that. Losing weight, I see that your weight's been dropping. He's like, I think you're all good. You don't need to come back. No follow-ups. We're good. And that was amazing. Now, one of the other issues here was, and I hope I mentioned it before I was telling the story, when we went in to see the nurse practitioner for the follow-up, I mentioned my leg was hurting and that we just done this drive, which is indicative of, blood clot. And we mentioned that, like, we're concerned about that. And she was like, no, it's not an issue. Turns out it was a blood clot. So I'm on thinners for that. Doctor, we just had a follow up with the doctor. Doctor's like, you're out of the danger zone, should be cleared up in, 6 to 8 weeks. You're looking really good. Your legs don't look any different. There's absolutely no swelling. He's like, I can't even tell that you had a blood clot. It looks that good. He's like, we are going to schedule you for a follow up ultrasound. And then I want you to see a specialist. He's like, just out of abundance of caution. So we're going to do that, and end of the month, beginning of February. So that's going on. But again, all these situations, I talk about being your own advocate. I should have pushed back more on the other thing. And when I talked about my leg with my doctor, like when I first saw the doctor, and they're like, it's not bacterial, it's viral. And I told him, like, look, I should have stood my ground. Like, look, I have a 55-year-old man. I have way more understanding of my health history than you do. Okay? I should have pushed back there. When I talked to him about my leg when I got back, I should have stood my ground and I should have pushed back there. And I know a lot about the medical industry. My stepfather was in pharmaceuticals, and I grew up around the medical industry quite a bit. So I know this. I know better, and even I didn't do it enough. So I want you guys, go and get yourself checked out. If you're worried about something, if you're feeling something, if something doesn't seem right, go and get it checked out. Okay? And if it sounds terrible and you're like, I don't feel like it is that, again, stand your ground. Make sure they do the right test. Make sure they get everything done. And I don't care if it's inconvenient for them. They need to do what they need to do. Anyway, that's what I wanted to tell you about. So at this point, we're all good. Blood clot's clearing up. Heart's just fine. We're back in the studio, as you can see. Hopefully going to be doing more of that. Although it's pretty cold out. We're getting some snow. And I don't know, maybe want to film from home for a while. Anyway, that's all I got for you. If you got any questions, put it down below. I'll try to answer them. If you got questions where you don't want them to be public, you can always email me at red@dentatools.com. I try to get back to you as much as I can. I get a metric ton of emails, but I will try and get back to you, I promise. Anyway, you all take care. God bless. And as always, shine on.